Welcome to Medicare 360. Today we're going to answer the top Medicare questions. So basics of Medicare, let's start. What is Medicare and who qualifies for it? So Medicare is for those 65 and over that are US citizens or permanent residents. If you are a permanent resident, you have to be at least here in the United States for 5 or more years. And so what is the difference between Medicare Part A, B, C, and D? So keep in mind, Medicare Part A is for hospital. If you worked for more than 10 years or had 40 quarters or had a spouse that worked for more than 10 years or 40 quarters, Medicare Part A is $0. Part B is everything that is included in medical terms besides the hospital. So that's your doctor's visits, your surgeries, your MRIs, your CAT scans, anything that doesn't have to do with hospital. So Part B in 2025 is $185, but there is a surcharge if your income was at a higher amount, and I'll go over that later. Part C is Medicare Advantage, which combines Part A hospital, Part B medical, plus Part D sometimes for the drugs to equal Part C. So Part D is a drug portion of Medicare. So if you get your red, white, and blue card, there is actually an invisible Part D that you do need a drug plan, because if you don't have a drug plan, you will be penalized 1% for every single year, actually month, that you didn't have it. So 1% for every single month that you did not have a drug plan. Recently, I had met a lady and she's like, oh, I'm all set. I talked to someone over the phone and I'm all good. I did let her know, well, let's just review it just to make sure everything's good. So I did review it, and I was really, really concerned because the biggest reason she got on her plan was because she had some upcoming surgeries and she did not want to pay 20% of that cost because she was on original Medicare. She had told the rep that she didn't need a drug plan because she didn't take any prescription drugs. I mean, she's going into surgery, so I'm assuming she probably will get prescribed drugs after the fact. But in this case, not sure why this rep just did what she asked her, right? I don't need a Part D. I don't take drugs. And that's incorrect, because now if she stayed on that particular plan, she'll be penalized every month 1% that she didn't have one. And when she decides to get a drug plan, that's when she would get penalized. So it was really mind-boggling that someone recommended this to her. The only reason why you wouldn't have a drug plan is if you have credible coverage, such as your group plan, or you have VA coverage, which the drug plan is also covered in there. So there's specific reasons why you don't have a Part D plan, or maybe you're 80 or 90 years old, never had a drug plan, and don't want to be penalized for it, so you choose not to have one. But in this case, she just turned 65 last year. And the plan that this person picked for her was a max out of pocket of $4,900. So if she was concerned about paying 20% for her surgery, the $4,900 in her zip code in her county was very, very high. So we're talking about she was put on a Medicare Advantage plan without a drug plan, one of the highest maximum out of pockets in the area. There's no reason for her to have that high of a maximum out of pocket. So these are the situations that I am very, very passionate about, and helping those that got wrong information. Unfortunately, I've had clients who've got information wrong from Social Security or Medicare. I had met this lady and she was fighting Medicare for 1 year because when she did call and ask, is her Cobra, because she got laid off, or is her Cobra credible coverage? And that person answered yes. And it is not. So she was tacked on that 1%, 10% penalty, right, on the Part B, because if you didn't get Medicare when you're supposed to, you'd get penalized 10% for every year. And since she didn't have a Part D, she was going to get penalized for 1% for every single month that she wasn't on it either. So luckily, she got this overturned, but this was a year of talking to government officials, trying to get her, for them to listen to her, writing letters, right, to government. And finally, they said they apologized because they had a recording. Imagine if they didn't have a recording, because she did her part and asked, and they gave her wrong information. She would have been penalized for years, forever. So things like that, they really do upset me. And unfortunately, wrong information is not good information, and you might be penalized. So be wary, be careful, get a couple of opinions from licensed agents that are certified every single year to know this. So please, I know that was on the tangent, but I really wanted to bring that home. So how do you enroll in Medicare, and when is the right time to do it? So the biggest thing on this is that if you are turning 65 and you have an individual plan on a like Obama ACA plan, don't have coverage on Medicaid, which in California is Medi-Cal, you need to get your Medicare, because if you don't, you will be penalized 10% for every single year that you weren't on it for Part B, and then Part D, 1% for every single month that you weren't on it. However, if you are currently working, you have credible group coverage. So the key is 20 or more employees. You do not need to get Medicare. But if you have a company that you work for that has 20 or less employees, Medicare actually becomes primary and your group insurance becomes secondary. So keep that in mind. Other questions relate to, well, do I apply for Medicare at all? Because I have decided to keep my group insurance. It's great. I don't pay very much. So if that's the case, you can apply for your Part A, which is the hospital, because it is secondary to your group benefits, because you are paying $0 for that if you worked for more than 10 years or 40 quarters. But let's just say you are contributing to a health savings account. So a health savings account, you're, deducting your payroll income to that to save for your health in the future. So with those, I do not recommend applying for Part A, because they will tell you to reverse the credit out when you do your taxes. It's not a penalty per se, but you're going to lose that tax credit. So keep that in mind. So is Medicare free? What cost should I expect? So Medicare is not free, right? We've been actually paying taxes on Medicare on your payroll if you see that. So, however, Medicare Part A would be $0 if you worked 10 or more years or 40 quarters or had a spouse that you could piggyback on. Part B, however, is a premium. Like I mentioned, it's $185 for per month in 2025. However, the more you make, you could actually get a surcharge. So how does that work? So for the year 2025, Social Security will look at your adjusted gross income in 2023. If you're single, making $106,000 or less, you will pay that monthly premium $185. And if you file joint and your income is $212,000 or more, you will also not get a surcharge. But if your income is greater than 106 single, 212 joint, and so on and so forth, it goes up to an income of 750,000 for joint and 500,000 individual. There's tiers, you will pay more. So they will look at your 2023 tax returns for 2025 premiums, and it could go up to triple of your cost of the 185. So keep that in mind. I really like to tell people this because sometimes your financial advisor will say, oh, why don't we take your 401k and your IRA and roll it over to a Roth IRA? If that happens, that becomes income. Or let's just say you had an inheritance or you sold your home and you had like a really big equity amount, right? So things like that, you do need to pre-plan for that so you don't get surprised. Because the biggest thing I believe, people just don't want to get surprised, right? If you got laid off, got a package, those are the things that might get you to that surcharge. You can ask Social Security to help you on it and waive it. If it's a one-time exception, they might be able to do that. So I've seen half and half. Some of my clients that have sold their home have asked for that waiver. And most of the time, they might give it and might not. So I just had a situation in where I had a client and we helped her. She basically sold her home, moved to a different state, and she was paying 2 times more in her regular Medicare premium. She couldn't afford it. And from that, when we called Social Security, they said, no, we're not going to waive it. She sold her home. We then told them that she was a widow and her husband just passed away. So with that case, they were able to say, okay, we will waive that surcharge for you. And so great, right? So it doesn't hurt to try and ask and give as many supporting details. That is a one-time exception and that you really do need that waiver. So keep that in mind when it comes to your taxes and your adjusted gross income. Of course, talk to your tax advisor on that. Many people do ask, does Medicare cover dental, vision, hearing services? No, unfortunately, original Medicare does not, unless it's like medically necessary, okay? Not just like your glasses or, just cleaning of teeth and things like that. But keep that in mind. So original Medicare does not cover those. However, Medicare Advantage plans do. Most of them do. So what really is the difference between original Medicare, Medicare Advantage, and Medicare supplement plans? So the biggest difference is that original Medicare, you do have a deductible for Part A, you have a deductible for Part B, and you have a 20% coinsurance. So meaning if you did have a knee replacement and it cost $100,000, you'd have to pay $20,000 out of your pocket. Okay, so however, you could go anywhere where Medicare is accepted throughout the whole United States. Go to the top cancer institute in Arizona, go to see a doctor, specialist, anywhere you want that accepts Medicare. Medicare Advantage plans, which seem to be really popular nowadays, what they do is they take over your original Medicare, and these insurance companies and the group and doctors that you're with take care and handle your care. So these plans combine the A, the B, mostly the D's, equal C, which is Medicare Advantage. These plans are either HMO or PPO. So HMO, you have one doctor that refers you to specialists. You need approvals and authorizations for it. And while original Medicare, you don't need that. There are PPO options, which are in or out of network, but max out of pockets might be higher. Premiums might be higher on that. So how does Medicare work with other insurance like employer coverage or Medicaid? So what I would say is if you are still on an employer coverage and you are paying and your premiums are less than the premiums on Medicare, it might behoove you to stay. Just keep in mind, you should compare your premiums, your co-insurance, your deductibles, your max out of pockets, your drug cost, any surgeries coming up, the type of care you want, how many doctors, specialists, are you okay with in or out of network? Do you want total freedom? Or are you okay with the authorizations and referrals? Medicaid, Medi-Cal in California, actually will pay for your Medicare premiums and will pay for the majority of your medical benefits. So that is something that helps if you are low income or know anyone low income. I do actually want to bring up share of cost because it has been coming up a lot. So during COVID, many were able to get approved for Medi-Cal. It's just they're approving everyone. They weren't really looking at it. And so the initiative was last year, after 4 years, that they were going to just make sure that everyone on Medi-Cal qualified for it. So while it took a little bit, because I've actually seen clients this year not qualify, not last, maybe it took a little bit for the Medicaid, Medi-Cal workers to review the files, is now they are getting off their Medicaid because it's based on income on that. So they are getting off, or they've actually applied. I've seen clients get really excited and so happy that they got approved for Medicaid, Medi-Cal. And so when I look at their paperwork, there is a share of cost. So the share of cost basically means is that you are approved for Medicaid. However, it won't start kicking in until you hit a certain amount of money that you're shelling out every month. So what I've been seeing is most clients have been over the range of over $2,000. So meaning they would have to get like a dental plan or purchase something medically to get on Medicaid with that share of cost of say $2,000. So it's not worth it. That is good to keep in have it, while if later on in life you do have to go to like a skilled nursing facility, and that will help with share of costs. So just wanted to bring that up because many are thinking that they have Medicaid and they don't, because they do have a share of cost. But that's probably another topic all in itself. Okay. We already talked about the income related monthly adjustment, which is IRMA, which is a big thing. So really, how can you avoid late enrollment penalties for Part B and D? Just make sure that you have credible coverage. And if that's group insurance, 20 or more employees, that's great. I would just bear in mind if you're going to retire at 67 or 70, that during the course of those years that you were on your group plan, so let's just say from 65 to 70, you do have the paperwork and the info that you were on credible coverage, because sometimes if the system doesn't catch that you have the credible coverage, they're going to ask you for an attestation, when you had your group coverage, and so forth. So to save that paperwork would be really good to keep in the event that the insurance companies or Social Security need that, because your employer or the HR of your previous employers from 65 till when you retire, those years, they will need to fill out a form for you that basically states that you did have group coverage, which is credible coverage. So keep that in mind. So how do prescription plans work, right? So the prescription plans is either included on your Medicare Advantage plans. Some, like the lady I had mentioned, didn't have that one and she needed that. So make sure if you have a Medicare Advantage plan and you do require the drug plan, that it is attached to that as a package. If you have a Medicare supplement plan, you do need a separate drug plan. So the premiums on the drug plans substantially last year was really low. They have increased it this year, and depending on the type of drugs you get, just kind of determines the premium. There is a deductible of $590 for 2025, and your drugs are tiered from preferred generic, branded, specialty drugs, non special drugs, branded drugs. So those are the tiers. Depending, they could be a copay or a co-insurance once you hit your deductible, and depending on the tier, might not even fit in the deductible. So the donut hole is going away, so keep that in mind. If you've heard maybe your relatives that are older, there was a donut hole where you were paying 25% of drug plans. You had to hit 8,000 to get out of that donut hole, but that's gone away actually. Max out of pocket for your drugs is $2,000 this year. And you could actually get a payment plan if you know you're going to go over, know that you're going to get to that 2,000. So keep it in mind as well. What other questions? Let's just say another question I get is, does Social Security benefits and Medicare have to be at the same time? And they actually don't. So meaning you could get on Medicare without getting Social Security, or you could get Social Security without getting Medicare. You could apply the same time. You don't have to apply for the same time. So it doesn't coincide together on that. So keep that in mind. You don't have to pick or choose one or the other or both. It's going to really be determined. So definitely I would say is talk to a licensed professional insurance agent that's certified to help you with your Medicare. You're going to get so many biased opinions from your neighbors and your friends. A lot of seniors I meet are just like, what do I do? You know, some people love this plan and some people love this type of plan. So what is the best? I would say, yes, educate yourself, but also talk to a licensed professional like me to help you with that. So I think time's up for today, but I will see you next week. Have a wonderful week ahead.